Well, good afternoon, listeners. Thank you so much for coming on to listen or watch Lament of Hope podcast. And I'm very privileged and excited today. I was scanning the news several weeks ago, which I was just telling Theresa here, who's on the phone with me, that is extremely depressing normally. But I came across this really cool story about her and Danielle. Both of them are nuns. The lady I have on here is Sister Theresa Aletheia. And she is, her and Danielle they've started an association. It's not an order yet. They hope to make it an order in the future. But they're an association of the Catholic Church that is actually bringing almost like counseling of sorts to individuals who have been harmed by the Catholic Church. And that would be like sexual abuse or spiritual abuse or even physical abuse. And it was something that they experienced kind of tangentially in a different order through a sister there that they had. And they left that order in 2022 and started the Sisters of the Little Way of Beauty, Truth, and Goodness. And they're hoping to make this an actual order of the Catholic Church in Kentucky, but right now it is an association. So forgive me if I said order again. But anyway, she's on the podcast to talk about her journey and to talk a little bit more about the association. So, Sister Theresa, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on, Danielle.
So, I want to kind of start out because I think there can be very romantic views about being a nun. I know several single ladies, including myself, when I was single, would always say, well, maybe we'll just join a nunnery, and we laugh, or there can be very drastic opinions about what a nunnery is like or what it is to be part of an order or a nun. So can you kind of share with me, what was your journey to becoming a nun? Like, did you want to do this for a long time? How did that happen for you?
Everyone's story is different, but for me, I was raised Catholic. I wasn't really interested in becoming a sister or nun when I was growing up, but when I became 14, I became an atheist, so I was away from the church for quite a while. But I had a conversion experience in my 20s, and after that conversion experience, I had a prayer life and a spiritual director, which is someone who kind of mentors you in the spiritual life. And in that time, where I was just asking the Lord where he wanted me, I felt like I was being called to religious life. And so I entered the convent when I was 29.
Okay. And you are, how many years ago was that?
That was about 16 years ago. So I'm in my 40s now.
Wow. Okay. And what was the religious experience you had?
I became an atheist because for several reasons, but mostly it was the problem of suffering. I didn't understand how there could be a good God and he could allow evil to exist.
Yeah.
So, and also, my parents were very involved in the church and I saw a lot of hypocrisy. So I remember as a child thinking, if this is where people get when they're doing all the right things, then I'd rather try things on my own. So but I was an atheist for I think about 12 years, and I was very involved in animal rights, and it's a long story, but basically because of my involvement in animal rights, I started to think about the human soul and whether humans had a soul. And that question about a human soul kind of led me to a place where I was starting to flirt with the idea that maybe God existed, that maybe there was more to the world than material reality. And my conversion experience, though, kind of happened in a moment where I was in Costa Rica. I was working on a farm. And one day I was just walking and everything around me was so beautiful and the wind blew, and I just felt like in that moment that God was introducing himself to me, and I just knew that he loved me, that he was real, and that he had a plan for my life. And so that moment changed my entire life after that.
Wow, so you were literally just walking and all that just hit you as a sudden thought?
Yeah. I mean, I think I had a lot of intellectual struggles that led up to that moment,
Hmm.
but in that moment, I think I was taking in the beauty around me, and I realized that there is there is someone who is beauty itself, and
Hmm.
it was kind of like an intellectual moment where I realized that, but also it was a moment where I was meeting someone who loved me.
Well, I was gonna say, that must have been kind of relieving after so much like inner turmoil to have just this moment of like, this is true. Like no more wrestling in your heart over whether there was a God or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm naturally someone who wrestles with a lot of things, so it wasn't the end of my wrestling. It wasn't even the end of my wrestling about believing that God existed, to be honest. I still experience doubt around that sometimes, but it definitely was a moment where I felt like I had discovered truth, and that was something that was very important to me, and that I was searching for truth.
Hmm. You know, and I have to ask, you said you were working with animals, and that actually led you to think about the human soul. Were you thinking if animals had
Mhm.
souls?
Yeah, I did believe that animals had souls, but among animal rights activists, there's this idea of speciesism, which is basically the idea that all species are equal in worth, and that really humans just think that they're more important than animals. And
Wow.
I never really agreed with that, but philosophically, I realized that in order to disagree with that, you have to believe in a human soul. And so that wrestling with that led me to the belief in a human soul. But that's not to say that I didn't believe that animals were sentient. Like obviously, I was an animal rights activist, so I believe that animals were sentient. I believe that animals have a soul. I just believe
Yeah.
that a human soul is different. Yeah.
So tell me, so you said you started being mentored by a spiritual director and then you felt called to religious life. I know religious life though can be varied, like missionary work, or
Hmm.
there's a whole bunch of avenues you can take with that. What specifically about being a nun did you decide this is what I'm called to? Because being a nun I is more restricting than it would be to be like a missionary.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Tech Technically, a nun is someone who is cloistered. So, like
Okay.
colloquially, we use nun for any sort of religious sister. But I became a religious sister with a community that was, I mean, they were kind of missionaries. That a lot of them would be in different countries, but I stayed in the United States. But their work was around media work, which, to be honest, that I didn't join them because I was attracted to that kind of work. I just felt like God was calling me to that community, and so I joined. Um, the main reason that I became a sister, though, was because I felt like I wanted to devote my entire life to God and to whatever He
Yeah.
wanted to ask of me. Um, I'm kind of a radical person, so when I heard him calling me in that direction, I wasn't super thrilled, to be honest, at first, because I was like, why would I want to do that? But I love God, so I wanted to do what God wanted me to do, and so that's why I ended up in this direction, going in this direction.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I mean, 16 years being a sister, what is the hardest thing you think about being a sister?
Um, for me specifically, I would say I think giving up my own plans for things. You really have to kind of be open to what God is asking of you. I mean, this is true whatever you do. But in religious life, I think it can be a bit more restricted, depending on which community you join or what you end up doing. But I never imagined beginning my own community. That was kind of not even anything I ever entertained. So I think when you devote your life fully to God, and this is in the religious life or in any way of life where you're trying to dedicate yourself completely to God, I think
Yeah.
he can surprise you. And I think that's the most difficult and the most beautiful thing about it. It's difficult because you are surprised and you're not sure if you want to do what he's asking you. And it's also beautiful because his plans are always better than ours, even if they don't seem like it at first.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm thinking you must have felt that way in 2022 because when I was at least reading the article, it said you'd been there almost a decade in this one order, and
Mhm.
you found out about this abuse that had happened to a fellow sister from a spiritual director, someone that you even, you've been mentored by a spiritual director in the past, and
Mhm.
then deciding, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to start a community of my own with one other person. I mean, that must have been pretty daunting.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't do that because of, what happened with the spiritual director, and he was my spiritual director also. But what happened, I mean, that definitely informed my knowledge around this issue.
Hmm.
But that happened, several years um, before I left the community, and we had submitted a case to the Vatican twice. We had submitted a case actually, and the case hadn't come back yet. So really, you know, I understand this issue from the perspective of someone who both myself and Sister Danielle, we talk about our experience in a podcast called Descent into Light, and so it goes into this all of this story a lot more in depth. So if you're kind of like feeling like you're missing parts, like you could listen to the podcast and explains a lot more. Um, but basically, I was I was about at the point where I was going to make final vows. I had been with the sisters for 12 years, and final vows is kind of like your final moment where you're dedicating yourself to God and to the communities. And um, so in that discernment, I felt called to something new, and that was just as much a surprise to me as it was to everybody else in my community.
Hmm. And what specifically led you to want to start something where you would actually be helping people who had experienced sexual or religious abuse in some way?
As I prayed with it, that was the work that I felt God was calling me to do.
Hmm.
Um, I, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really even connect it to my own personal experience until later. It was more like I just felt like that was something that God wanted, um, an area that God wanted me to work in, and Sister Danielle felt the same way. Um, yeah, and it makes a lot of sense because of my personal experience. I think that informs what we're doing for sure.
Yeah. Can I ask, personal experience wise, were you close to the sister who had been harmed, or was it also the fact that it was your spiritual director? What aspect of it do you think really hit home for you?
So, when this sister was alleged assault from this spiritual director, and when I was informed of it, I wasn't told. I would the word assault was not used. I was just told. I wasn't even told the depth of what had happened, but I immediately felt like I had to reevaluate my entire relationship with him because there had been red flags and strange things that had happened while he was my spiritual director. And so when
Hmm.
she submitted a case to the Vatican about what had happened to her, I submitted corroborating support testimony that where I said that I thought that he was grooming me in spiritual direction. Um, and Sister Danielle later submitted her testimony in the second case as well.
Can I ask, what is that like from a spiritual perspective? Because, I've never, thank the Lord, have not experienced sexual abuse.
Hmm.
I've experienced spiritual abuse apart from the sexual aspect of it. But when the two are combined, where it's almost like you hear the stories obviously of young children, and many of them come to you as adults and talk to you about this, like how strange it is to have this figure in your life who is your spiritual mentor, who you look up to, who
Hmm.
is supposed to be following God and then giving you spiritual direction, and then at the same time doing something where your gut's like, this doesn't seem right, but you are supposed to be a kind person. So you're really,
Hmm.
it's really confusing. Can I ask for you,
Hmm.
like, especially coming from an atheist background, when you were talking about how suffering was like your hang up about God,
Hmm.
was that hard? Like, did that put you back into a dark place? I mean, how did you kind of work that out in your mind before they actually announced that this was something that had happened to someone else?
Um, I only was able to contextualize what I had experienced after I heard about what happened to the other sister.
Okay.
Because he didn't abuse me. I just believe that he was grooming me, and so and I go into we both go into more detail in the podcast about what that involves. But basically, I mean, it's the same process with children and with adults. It just can become more subtle with adults because adults are difficult in some ways to manipulate, more difficult to manipulate. But
Yes.
it's the same process, like making someone feel special, um, inappropriate things, like just raising inappropriate things, but in very subtle ways. So you're kind of testing the person.
Right.
Um, yeah, and there were just moments of physical contact that didn't feel uncomfortable, but weren't like that wasn't assault necessarily, but it was like, I don't know what's happening here. So I think what I've learned from the situation and what we talk about in Descent into Light is that um, grooming can happen with adults, and it happens not only for a person, but it happens for an entire community. So this priest had made himself so indispensable to the community, and he was such a highly revered figure in the community. He was on their board. He, led spiritual retreats for the sisters, for all of the sisters, for the sisters in leadership. Um, and so whenever I experienced inappropriate things, I would put it in that context. I would say, but he's trusted by all these people, which
Right.
is, I think anyone who's experienced any form of spiritual abuse, they question themselves in those situations where this very often someone who perpetrates these kinds of abuses will put themselves in a spiritual situation or in a position of power where you find it hard to question them, even when they're doing very inappropriate things.
Right.
And you're constantly giving them the benefit of the doubt because everyone loves this person and he has the trust of so many people. So it must be me. You keep questioning your own experience and questioning why am I the one, why am I uncomfortable, but everyone else doesn't seem to be uncomfortable.
Right. Do you when you found out that this had happened and could put a name to it, and sort of your gut feelings about all of this were validated in a way,
Hmm.
um were how did you wrestle with the Lord on that? Was that something that you were like, why is this happening in a place I love, in a place I've come to serve you? Like, was there any sort of
Hmm.
wrestling on that with the Lord?
Definitely. And I think yeah, I really asked him why he allowed that to happen. I think as I thought about it, I think that Um, I had this impression that religious life would be a safer place. Um, and I think a lot of people idealize different communities or different, we
Yeah.
all want to find a safe place. And looking back, I'm not blaming myself for that, but what I realize is that there aren't safe places. We're all human and dangerous things can happen anywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's part of the work that we do is helping people, educating around safeguarding and educating around abuse prevention to help people to realize that no community is 100% safe. Um, we always have to be on the lookout for these dynamics and these people and structures that enable them.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, like, so many people I know in my life were religious at some point or went to church at some point, and then something happened, either, it could be sexual abuse or spiritual abuse or just honestly something very hurtful from a church body
Mhm.
of some kind. And they said, I'm done with God because God is just, his people don't reflect him well. So I'm done with God because this is what God must be like. And there's been so
Mhm.
many conversations I've had with individuals and even wrestling myself about trying to remember, like, God is not a sinner. God doesn't make mistakes. So
Mhm.
because a sinner did this to me, it doesn't make God the one who did this. Now, he allowed this to happen for a reason. I have to trust that his
Mhm.
reasons are good, but he doesn't make evil people, like sinners, like us, do evil things. We
Mhm.
choose to do them. But it is
Mhm.
really hard to separate the two in your mind because you're always like, okay, but
Mhm.
God's in control, so he could have done something.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how do
Mhm.
you confront that with the people you talk to? Because I'm sure that must come up a lot.
Yeah, I think when we're hurt by someone who represents God in some way to us or holds spiritual power, um, that can definitely impact how we see God. And I mean, I've had to heal from that for sure. Um, and I don't know. When we talk to people, we don't necessarily, we're not counselors or therapists, so it's not, and we meet with them only once right now because that's only what we're capable of doing as two people. But, and we try not to give advice, and we're not really there to help anyone. They're helping us by sharing their story and sharing the wisdom that they learned through their experience.
Hmm.
And we hope by listening to these stories that we can bring the wisdom that they learned to the church to prevent abuse in the future. So
Okay.
we learn from the people that we talk to the ways that they survived what they survived. Um, some of them have incredible and powerful and close relationships with God, and others don't believe in God anymore.
Hmm.
Um, it just really depends on what they've experienced, how they experienced it. But what we hope is just by listening and caring that in some way that can repair maybe the experience that they had in the church. Not only the abuse necessarily, but the reporting process or trying to get people to pay attention to what they were saying. Because
Hmm.
in a lot of cases, that being unheard when you go to report or dismissed, um,
Yeah.
people say that's more damaging than what they initially experienced.
Hmm. So, if I were to call you, and for someone listening who, because I know, like, your email, you have your email and your website, everything, like, people can send you a message and you'll meet with them once, like you
Hmm.
said.
Hmm.
Is that hard for you? Like, you're getting on the other end of this, Zoom call with someone you don't know and you have no idea what their story is going to be. Like, you have an idea of the theme, but you don't know
Mhm.
like the depth to which they'll go or how they'll react. Is that hard for
Mhm.
you? Like, how many calls are you doing a day? Is it more, do you kind of pace yourself on these? Because this is an emotional moment.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of people who mentor us in this work and who have helped us
Okay.
to do it with the space and the self-care that is necessary to listen to the kinds of stories that we listen to. And it is difficult. It's difficult to listen to traumatic stories and to listen to other people's trauma. But honestly, um, the most difficult part of our work is when people don't have the will to listen to these kinds of stories, and want they they don't want to make space to care about these experiences.
Hmm.
And these are people in the church who just can't. They can't incorporate this reality into their experience of the faith, and so in many ways that creates the situation where when people experience abuse they go unheard because people don't want to hear these experiences.
What would be an example of that for you? Like if you're talking or sharing this with a sister from a different order, or how would that look if someone didn't want to hear it?
um a lot of times people respond to hurt in the church with bypassing, so spiritual bypassing. It's a psychological term where instead of meeting someone in their pain and their grief, we bypass it with spiritual platitudes because it's creating a discomfort for ourselves. So we want to avoid that feeling of discomfort. And
Hmm.
so, like a common example of this is when someone dies and someone says, "Well, they're in heaven now." It doesn't really help someone who's grieving, but a lot of
Yeah.
Christians do that. We just kind of
Yeah.
bypass someone's pain and we go straight to the spiritual reality, which doesn't mean the spiritual reality isn't true, but it doesn't help someone who's in pain.
Right.
And so that often happens to people who have experienced abusive situations um, in the church. When they go to share it with someone, the person will spiritually bypass and go straight to the positive or the silver lining of something, or they'll change the subject because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so our work is actually very simple. It's not doing that. It's just sitting with someone and holding that pain with them because it's a
Yeah.
burden that they're carrying alone. And so hopefully by listening to their stories, we carry it with them, or we help them to feel like somebody else cares.
Yeah. And can I ask, like, in your own relationship with the Lord, do you feel safe to lament about things in life and like grieve without feeling like you have to end on a good note, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that is why I can do it with other people because I know that the Lord can hold it. I know that the Lord can take anything that I say to him, and I can complain, I can be angry, I can tell him exactly how I feel. Um and he can take it because that's that's God. He can take any, and that's prayer, really. What is prayer for spiritually bypassing or trying to be on our best behavior with God? That's not a real relationship. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think I learned that from my relationship with God, that He does that for me, and so I try to do that to the extent that I can as a human being. I try to do that for other people.
Yeah. Can I ask if you have, like, for yourself personally, is there like an episode or a time of your life when you really felt like the Lord met you in the sadness you're feeling, almost like you're meeting these people, like being there present?
Yeah, I mean, He does that for me all the time, but I would say, when I was really struggling with what had happened with that other sister, and how this spiritual director I felt betrayed by what had happened, um, I I knew that I could take everything that I felt about that and bring it to the Lord. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I feel like, you know, I say this often that it's not like being a Christian takes away your doubts that God exists or takes away, all of our uncomfortable feelings or makes everything better. Um, but I do feel like I can bring it to Him, even my doubts that He exists. And
Uh,
that's the difference.
yeah.
The human experience doesn't change.
No.
But I mean,
Wouldn't
and
it
we
be
see
great
that
if
in
it
this.
did?
It would be wonderful. And I think sometimes we expect that. We think that because we're Christian, God's going to just take away everything, all of our pain and all of our lamenting and all of our complaining and suffering. But we see it in the Psalms that every single emotion you go through in the Psalms, every single emotion you go through, every single one of them. God doesn't take away our humanity. He just helps us carry it.
Hmm. Can I ask, too, like, what does your day look like? What is, like, if someone was to ask you, what is a day in the life for you of doing this work? What is it like?
Um, so our day has a rhythm of religious life, which is for a lot of communities, it would be the Liturgy of the Hours, which is praying the Psalms and praying readings from Scripture. And we sing our morning and evening prayer, and we go to Mass every day. So that's the, the prayer core of our life. We also pray an hour of prayer every day. And then it depends on the day. We have 2 days a week where we meet with survivors. And
Okay.
so, and then there are other days where we meet with other collaborators and other people who are reaching out to us for other reasons. And both Sister Danielle and I are also in school, so we have study days also.
Oh, wow, what are you studying?
Sister Danielle is getting a master's in ministry, and I'm working on a PhD in. I'm focusing on studying obedience in religious life because we take a vow. We take 3
Wow.
vows. We take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And as you can imagine, a vow of obedience is something that can be misused. So I'm studying the misuse of it
Yeah.
and how it can be understood in a healthy way.
And that's a PhD?
Hmm. Well, I'm doing it through a school, the same school in Rome where we studied safeguarding. So they have a whole
Okay.
area of anthropology that focuses on safeguarding.
Wow, so you look at it, so you're looking at obedience, is it through like the biblical lens of what obedience actually means, like with boundaries and things like that, or is it
Yeah, it would be biblical and also in tradition, in the tradition of religious life, how it has traditionally been understood to be limited.
okay?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because I did want to ask you, I've wondered, like, many of my Catholic friends that I've spoken to, a lot of their hope is put into what they do, um, how well they obey, to gauge like how
Mm.
pleased God is with them.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing I've always wrestled with myself because I'm like, scripture makes clear in the sense that like Christ came and took that for you. That doesn't mean you don't try to obey his laws. You do so out of a love for him, but not a fear that you'll lose your salvation. And the people that I've
Mm.
talked to, several of them, it's like if I do the right things enough times, then I will, God will be pleased with me and it will end up well with me when I die. But
Hmm.
I wonder for you, like as you're studying obedience, because it's such an interesting and hard topic to grapple with, like how do you feel about that? Like how does obedience look in view of your salvation?
Hmm. Um, I think maybe I think about it a little bit differently. I don't really think about it in those terms necessarily, but um, I like e- Catholics do believe that in some ways, religious life is kind of an analogy to eternal life. So
Hmm.
we're living kind of symbolically the like chastity, poverty, and obedience. Jesus says there's no marriage in heaven. So
Right.
we're living kind of what we're anticipating, and so that's how I see the vows. Is it's kind of a beautiful symbolism of anticipating eternal life, and my obedience ultimately is to God,
Right.
um, and then it can be mediated in different ways, but with limits. There are limits to human mediation of yeah. So yeah, I guess I can understand what you're saying. I think for Catholics, it's not so much about like that we believe that we have to do the right thing because God will punish us necessarily, but we believe that Jesus has saved us, but it does require our continual cooperation. With fear and
Yeah.
trembling, we work out our salvation, and I think um, maybe that's how I see it. But I don't really think of obedience as something that like if I make a misstep, then you know God's gonna be up there, like he's gonna punish me, because that's just not my experience with Jesus. He's you know um, when I sin, I do want to go to him and say I'm sorry because I know that my
Yeah.
sin hurts you. Um, but I do it because I love him, because I know how much he loves me.
Right. So you don't feel that, and maybe this is something, it's something I've wanted to talk more but with my Catholic friends about too, is it's like, because I know it could just be for some Catholics like a huge emphasis on works, but they still really do believe that Christ is the only need. Like he's the only way to salvation, but the works are extremely important because if you don't, if you neglect the works, then you're not really a Christian because where are you living out the Holy Spirit in your life? Um,
Hmm.
and that sounds like, from talking to you, that sounds like what you're saying. It seems like you believe Christ is the only way to heaven. Your works don't like contribute to it, but if you don't do works, where is your faith at all, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Catholic approach is that there are certain sins where we are choosing to walk away from God, and we're choosing to walk away from our salvation, and we're free. God gives us a choice for
Yeah.
sure. Um, yeah, but I don't think of it in terms of works at all. Yeah.
What do you think? I know you mentioned earlier about your struggles and doubts with God's existence in general, but I was going to ask you with the obedience aspect because that was so interesting to me. Do you find a certain aspect of obedience super hard?
Um, well, right now, there's just two of us, so it's not like where you have to really. Well, we do have to be obedient to our bishop. We have a bishop, but I mean, I think obedience is difficult. When I was in the convent, I had various superiors, and depending on um, the superior's personality or how she would ask you to do things, it could be very frustrating. But I religious obedience, even though it can be abused and misused,
Yeah.
the proper understanding of it is dialogue. You're listening to God. You're you're the person who it has authority over you is listening to God, and you dialogue, and you talk to each other about what that is before. But then an ultimate decision is made by the person with the authority. So I mean that is very difficult, but it's also I felt, in obedience to God. who called me to this way of life that I I, I decided to do it, even though naturally not. I'm kind of a rebellious person naturally.
Yes, I mean, I also sounds like you're a very passionate person,
Hmm.
which can be good, and
Hmm.
passionate people are often rebellious. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and being rebellious can be good too. You just have to rebel against the right things.
Yes, very good.
Hmm.
That's true too. Yeah, I don't know if you learned that in the obedience PhD program, but that that sounds like that is like a healthy view. You're right, because there are things that you don't obey because they're
Hmm.
wrong.
Yeah.
Um, well, I want to be respectful of your time, so I just want to ask last question for you is, um, I remember you mentioned, um, that you don't offer any advice to people you're talking to because you're not a counselor, you're there to listen.
Hmm.
So, in hoping to eventually become an order and having more ladies join you in this
Hmm.
work,
Hmm.
is it a hope that your association will eventually become a place where people could come and actually receive counseling from a Catholic order? Or are you hoping that the association will eventually become a place where people are gathering so much data and information that that will be sent to a hub in the Catholic Church in a way where that information can be used for education purposes?
Mm. I mean, I think our sisters will probably end up doing a lot of different things, even things that I
Okay.
can't even imagine. Um, and really, it will be informed by the women who join and the things that they're interested in doing and the qualifications that they have. I'm sure that some will be counselors in some capacity. Um, but because we're sisters
Yeah.
at our core, I mean, that's the core reason why we exist. And then we do this mission. I think our dream is to create a space and a place where people can come and visit us and participate in our liturgy. And we want to build a chapel that is dedicated to survivors and a space where survivors can say, this is my home too.
Well, Sister Theresa, it's been such a gift to talk with you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to do a podcast. I really
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much for having me on, Danielle. Yeah, and as someone who listens all the time, you are a very good listener, so I appreciate being on.
Ah, thank you, and I hope you got a
Hmm.
break from listening. We
Yeah, I
needed a
did.
break. We needed to
Thank you.
talk. All right,
Yeah,
well, you have a good day. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.